But in terms of changing the global supply chains, it'll take a few years. But I guess it doesn't take that much time as either. I mean, I think by 2030, what is likely, you will have a somewhat different network of global supply chains, and India intends to be very much a part of that. We already are a very important part of the global services supply chains, where people don't talk about this. We are probably right up there with the US in terms of services supply chains. But in terms of manufacturing and goods supply chains, we have obviously been nowhere near, for example, what China does. But the idea is that in the next 5 years, we become a very important part of that supply chain. And you can see we are putting in a big effort into all kinds of things, whether it is electronics or people now look at other areas like metals and materials and capital goods and engineering goods. All of these areas are where we do want to become a part of. Even if the United States wants to re-industrialize itself, it will need to get inputs from other places. Nobody in the world will be competitive trying to do everything. So in that environment, we do want to be a part of those countries that provide inputs into the re-industrialization of the US, if that's what it wants to.
Sanjeev, you just mentioned China, and it's interesting, isn't it, that yesterday we were having a conversation with IDC, and the top-selling phones in India are Vivo, Oppo, and Xiaomi. Does that tell you that Chinese consumers, Indian consumers are agnostic? Or do you feel that even closer relationships and closer economic ties with China and India, long-term rivals, are not off the table? We've been hearing a lot about Chindia. We've been hearing a lot about the dragon dancing with the elephant. What do you think?
So we trade with China. We have very close trading relationships. In fact, in terms of our imports of goods, in fact, China is our single largest source. So it is not that we don't trade with China. And indeed, we intend to continue doing so. And, you may have also seen that a lot of Chinese companies are coming to India and setting up shop as well. So this is something that will continue. There is no reason why we cannot both compete and collaborate with China at the same time. And that, I think, is what you will expect will happen. So just because we are integrating more closely with the Western economies does not at all mean that we will not be having an economic relationship with China. We will continue to have an economic relationship with them. In fact, in many areas, there are many areas where there is a domestic market in India and in China, and there are goods that we intend to supply into each other's markets which have nothing to do with the North Atlantic.
Thank you for that, Sanjeev. Let's take a closer look at the domestic economic metrics and the outlook. Latest data suggested a rate of unemployment in April stood at 5.1% for the workforce above the age of 15 years. This really touches on the issue of youth unemployment. How acute is this problem, and what's being done by the centre to address it?
So in the end, the most important thing about generating jobs is really about having growth going on a sustained basis. So we have obviously a very large population, and we also have a youth bulge. So, there is suddenly a large number of people for whom jobs need to be created. You can do all kinds of things on the side, but ultimately the single biggest source of jobs is just growth, which relates to all these free trade agreements that we are also talking about. We want to deploy our labor force, young as it is, and increasingly more skilled, into being able to supply all kinds of goods and products and services into the global market. That's the only way we can really take advantage of it. Of course, there are many domestic things we can use them for as well. And so maintaining high growth rates is an absolute priority. Now, in this context, let me say that for several years now, we have had reasonably high growth rates. We have been the fastest growing economy of any scale. And we will continue to be for some time, as per the reckoning of virtually every major IMF, World Bank, or any multilateral that you may be asking. So,
Sanjeev,
first thing here, this requires two things. that we don't lose our heads about trying to force growth at any one point in time. So we have been very careful. We have been sustained bringing down our fiscal deficit. We have actually kept our monetary policy very tight. Although we are easing it, but we are doing it in a very structured, slow way. So keeping this growth momentum going so that the compounding process can play itself out is important for us. And so whether the free trade agreement or a rather careful approach to COVID management, if you will remember there, is really aimed ultimately and allowing this compounding process of growth to play itself out.